paper, what my final
Awesome.
presentation is. I don't know if anybody.
Just because we do have probably like half of our committee tends to join online, so that would be helpful if you have the digital one.
Carol's our audio, but I'm gonna start with the officers.
No, yes, whatever you want.
I don't have
Had the same thought.
I'm at a separate part.
So you're planning a coup.
Yeah, I was gonna say, there's absolutely no such plan.
And then we might have a few more stragglers. That works okay. Good. Okay. So that's totally okay, Brenda. Someone online, can you give us just a thumbs up if you can hear us?
I can hear you.
Thank you, Carol.
That's not thumbs up. That was easier.
Just hit that. Should be there. Okay, we're just waiting on two more people to get to quorum. This is Bianca, so that's 9. One more person, and Steve. Amazing. Great timing, everyone. Almost like we planned to start at this time. Great. So welcome to our October PTAC meeting. Who's our acting secretary for tonight?
I'm doing it tonight.
Thank you, Carol. Let's start with a roll call of our members. And then guests, I will also ask you to introduce yourselves, but I'll tell you how to do that when we get there. Just giving you a little heads up. Starting with Ted Alexander.
Here.
Ginny Alverson. I do not see. Caroline Bodiger. Meredith Brown.
Here.
Laura Evans. Christopher Ferry. Tim Gilman, I know cannot make it tonight. Preston Gutelius.
Here.
Tajoka Harai.
Here.
Brenda Marvin.
Here.
Steve Mulder.
Here.
Barbara Myers.
Here.
Bianca Narkunis.
Yeah.
Vitor Pamplona.
Here.
Zach Rosenberg cannot make it tonight. Alejandro Steiger, myself. Rob Stanzel said he could not make it tonight. And Carol Vigaras.
Here.
Christopher just joined. Oh, wonderful. Hello, Christopher. Moving on to our ex officio members, City Councilor at Large Willem Bob, I do not see. Kate White.
Here.
and Justin Schreiber, who I did not. Okay, our guest tonight. Also, folks online, what are you seeing on the shared screen?
Seeing a Chrome tab that says my webinars.
Could you try resharing, Kate? I don't think they're seeing the agenda. Come on now.
See the agenda now. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I would like our guests to introduce themselves. It looks like we have a few folks online, a few folks in person. Our guest from SPD, Sergeant Mike McCary, would you like to introduce yourself first?
Hi, Sergeant Mike McCary, Somerville Police Department Traffic Division. I'm in charge of the municipal road safety grant, which the city has been awarded. We're just waiting for approval to implement fiscal year 2025 grant. I'm also going to present on what we did on the 2024 grant to hopefully ease into the 2025 grant.
Awesome. Thank you for being here tonight. Moving on to Joel, who is also in person.
So, hi, yeah, sorry, what was the question?
Just introduce yourself.
Oh, hi, yes, I'm Joel, and I love coming to these things. It's very interesting learning about the new stuff that's changing in the community.
Awesome. Thanks for being here. I also see Ginny. I will invite you to the list. So Sarah and Sheila, when I say your name, you should see an option on your screen to unmute yourself. And I would love for you to just say your name, your ward in Somerville if you live here, and then a little bit about why you're here tonight. So why don't we start with Sarah?
Hi, I'm Sarah, Ward 2. I'm interested in pedestrian and bicycle issues and transportation.
Awesome. Thank you for being here tonight. And how about Sheila?
Hi, I'm a current UEP student at Tufts, so I'm just attending the meeting. Similar to what Sarah said, interested in bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure in Somerville.
Awesome. Thank you for being here. I also had to go to a public meeting for my degree a few weeks ago, so welcome, welcome. Okay. Moving on to our September minutes. Does anybody have changes that they would like to request to the minutes? Okay, seeing none, I motion to approve the September minutes. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, great. Just quickly, some administrative things. Our next few meetings are going to be a little different. Next month, we'll be meeting on November 14th, which is the second Thursday instead of the third Thursday. We had to do that to get the library space where we usually meet. So just make sure that you have that on your calendars. And then our meeting is scheduled in December for December 19th. I just wanted to make sure that that would work for folks because it is getting a little close to holiday break. Is anybody not going to be able to make the meeting if we keep it at that date? Amazing. Then we will not change anything. All right. Subcommittee updates. Very exciting because we just changed our subcommittees. So this is the first subcommittee report of our new structure. I can start with the community events subcommittee if for no other reason than it's alphabetical, but we met for the first time on October 2nd. And it was myself, Ted, Barbara, Preston, Rob was there to observe as another subcommittee lead hopeful. And Brenda did not join. Was I missing someone? I think that was everyone. Barbara, yes, yeah, okay, great. So anyhow, our plan is to meet the first Wednesday of every month to plan our community walks and tablings. And we have 2 upcoming events back to back. We're going to be tabling at Summer Streets, the Monster Mash event. with mobility, as well as some folks from the bike committee, which is great. So that's gonna be Sunday, October 20th, 2 to 6 p.m. on Somerville Ave near Market Basket. Ted, Barbara, and I are gonna be staffing the table. We have shifts, but if you would like to join, you're very welcome. Just email me and let me know, and we would love to have you. And then the day after that, on Monday, October 21st, we're gonna be hosting a community walk on Western Pearl Street, which is getting a reconstruction over the next few years, like we talked about in our last meeting. That's gonna be from 6 to 8 p.m. We'll meet in Gilman Square. That's also gonna be a collaboration with the bike committee, and we'll walk along the corridor to be reconstructed, and make observations, recognize pain points. And mobility will also be there, to receive community feedback and answer questions. So please feel free, to join. And then.
What was the date for that again?
Sorry, Carol?
What was the date for that again?
Oh, yes, Monday, October 21st at 6 p.m. Okay, moving on to design review.
So design review did not meet this month, but we do have a very important meeting coming up on October 31st. This is going to be about Western Pearl, that we're just gonna have the walk and then talk about it on a subcommittee meeting, see if we can draft a letter to the city, highlighting some of the main points of the discussion, and review the final design for West Broadway. That should be really close to the one we saw before, but you know, we still have to double check it. That's pretty much it.
Cool. So that is on the calendar, but you'll send out a link.
So yeah, reserve the date, please. Especially those who participated on the community meeting a few days ago, and on the walk, we will need you there.
And then special projects, which is to be led by Rob, is kind of on hold for now. Rob is about to go on vacation, and he is busy with other things, which is totally fine. So we'll get started with that subcommittee pretty soon. All right, our last order of administrative business before we get into the meat of our discussion with Sergeant McCary tonight. Officer elections. We have 4 folks nominated to serve in our officer positions. Myself as chair, Vitor as vice chair, Brenda as secretary, and Toko as our inaugural digital communications officer. Would anybody like to object or nominate someone else, or I don't know, change things up?
Alexandra, this is Ginny. With respect to communications, I thought of something that seems maybe not so important to everybody, but to the 2 people on the Disability Commission and me, we need to find a way to make sure that all material is available as text. And make sure that the city has it so that if people want Braille, they can have that, because the city now has a Braille embosser, and I have one sitting in my living room that I can use.
Yes, that's a great point. I've been making the agendas digitally accessible, but I don't think we do the same thing for all of our presentations and slides and all of that. So I think that can be an important element of our digital communications.
Yeah, so I would like to assist Rob in making that happen if I could.
Well, so Toko would be our digital communications chair, but I think we're not chair, officer. But I think that would be a wonderful partnership, certainly. Okay, thank you for raising that, Jeannie. Okay, I'm gonna motion to elect this slate of officers into office.
I'll second, this is Ted.
Thanks, Ted. All in favor, please say aye.
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 All opposed? Okay, wonderful. Thank you all. Brenda and Satoko, well, Satoko, I will definitely follow up with you, and then Brenda, Carol, and I will follow up with you to get you both going as two of our new officers. Very exciting. Yay.
Perfect, thank you.
Awesome. Okay, moving on to our discussion with Sergeant Mike McCary. I'm just gonna kick it over to you, Sergeant.
Thank you, Alessandra. As I introduced before, I work at Somerville Police Department. I'm the traffic sergeant. I'm one of two supervisors in that unit. And aside from everyday traffic deployment in the officers, I oversee the grant, municipal road safety grant writing and its implementation. One thing we've been trying to do with that is include the community and the committees that kind of have the feel for the community in making the decisions that are best for in coincides with what the community wants. I had offered through mobility to reach out to any of the committees that I would come to. You were nice enough to respond. I know we had some discussion back in the spring, like days before I had put in the proposal for this grant, and we were able to actually get some of your recommendations into this grant. You guys had presented me with some questions that you wanted me to touch on. So what I intend on doing is going over those questions, then go over the 2024 fiscal year 24 grant, what we were able to achieve during that, and I'll touch on the presentation we had made to the Finance Committee for that grant. I also have some other pieces of the grant that I want to bring up to the committee in the public. And then I'll take any questions that anybody has, whether it's either grant or traffic related, police related. I'm not going to read directly from a narrative, but there are some key points that I actually do want to hit on. So it's kind of going to be a little bit of off the cuff and from a script, if you will. So what is the Municipal Road Safety Grant? The Municipal Road Safety Grant is a no-match competitive grant opportunity provided by the state using federal funds and overseen by the Executive Office of Public Safety and Security. Its goal is to provide municipal departments with a high level of flexibility in determining both strategies to address local roads, strategies in determining local road safety issues. Eligible parts of the program include high visibility enforcement, using traditional enforcement campaigns, pedestrian bicycle focused enforcement, and alternatives for specific speed related safety equipment, and the development of non-enforcement programs that focus on enhancing community awareness, officers' knowledge, skills, and abilities. So we're awarded the grant based on a rating system, including among other criteria, how inventive we are with our grant proposal, how well we have utilized grants in the past, and how many people apply for the grant. So what is eligible under the grant? So the grant has several sections. It's really broken down into three categories. One is high visibility enforcement, and that's traditional police officers in cruisers, pulling people over for specific identified campaigns, whether it be speeding or click it or ticket, distracted driving, OUI, and I'll get into a little bit more of how that's determined in a couple of seconds. So the goal of that is to engage the public and highlight, dangerous activity to discourage that and, compel voluntary compliance by, a greater audience than what we're engaging with. Another aspect is specific speed related safety equipment. Some of this is like the speed feedback signs on the side of the road that, give you your speed and that they flash or say, slow down over a certain point. Speed measurement devices like radars and lidars. So the third element is the non-enforcement elements, and that is something that the Executive Office of Public Safety has been kind of pushing and increasing over the past couple of years. So what it wants departments to do is to develop non-enforcement programs to focus on enhancing community awareness, officers' knowledge, skills, and abilities. Where these are designed to engage the public in creative ways to inform, educate the public about certain dangers of items like distracted driving, share the road, and the visibility of vulnerable road users. And some of the things that we have used is, attending events like National Night Out in the beginning of August, either pop-up tents or roving officers to engage the public, town hall meetings, committee meetings such as this, and roving community interaction deployments, and giving out high visibility wristbands. Some of the other things that other departments have used in the past, or we've used in the past, are bike helmets, bicycle lights, coloring books, bicycle reflectors, reflective bands, reflective clothing, zipper tags, spoke clips, reflective vests, bracelets, and educational pamphlets. Either we have done those, or they're kind of in the waiting room to be deployed, depending on what works best. So the grantor, the Office of Grants and Research, and the EOPS, they decide on a yearly basis what they want for campaigns, in what months those campaigns will be rolled out in. That's optimal for their implementation. As an example, in late August, early September, we usually do pedestrian safety, which is hardcore crosswalk enforcement. And that coincides with the start of school and the start of colleges. Usually in January, we do an impaired driving campaign that coincides with January 1st. The counterpart to that is beginning of summer. We also do impaired driving. So they try to match what we're doing with what the public kind of needs to be reminded of at the time. For instance, this year, for fiscal year 25, which runs from, coincides with the state fiscal year, it runs from November 24 to September of 25. So we could deploy this grant if approved by the Finance Committee as early as December 1st, which would be impaired driving for the month of December, distracted driving for April, clicker ticket for May, speed enforcement for June, speed enforcement for July, and impaired driving for August and September, along with the other section for the pedestrian bicycle enforcement that could come as early as November 1st of 24, January, February, March, May, and then August of 25. So we have elected to take part in all of these, but we don't have to focus any particular amount of funds towards any particular single campaign. It's more of categorical spending. So I have to ask so much for the traffic enforcement campaign. I have to ask so much for the bicycle pedestrian campaign, and then so much for the non-enforcement goods and engagement over time. They use historical data from crashes, written citations to design their campaign rollouts. Usually coinciding with new traffic laws as well. Obviously, distracted driving over the past decade has kind of become more important. When they changed the law from cell phone use to hands-free, they really wanted the cities and towns to roll that out and really educate the public, that they need to put the cell phones down and not use them, not even touch them while they're driving. So how long has the Somerville Police Department been applying for a road safety grant? I've been here over 14 years, as long as I've been here, and I see the records go back beyond that. In some form or another, it has gone through different iterations in different titles, but essentially it is a road safety grant designed to put officers out on the street, to do kind of what I've been explaining. Some focused, deployment. So what has SPD used the grant for in the past? As I've mentioned, many of these campaigns, we have taken part in the past. Some of them being speed, impaired driving, pedestrian safety, seatbelt use. And those have always been the backbone of this grant. More recently, the hands-free has been ramping up, as I said, for over a decade now. But there is a kind of a change to education and like pamphlet disbursement, as opposed to just punitive fines. And that development has probably been in the last 3 to 4 years. So for this FY 25 grant application, we asked for $60,000 on 4 different categories. $60,000 is based on the size of the city, which is the most that we could have requested. Like I said, we were tentatively awarded by the state. Now there is some in-house approvals that have to happen before it is awarded. Those 4 categories being $30,324 for traffic safety enforcement, $10,775.90 for traffic safety equipment, which will include 4 portable breathalyzers, 2 handheld speed verification devices, radars, lidars, and 1 speed feedback sign. I'm sure everyone's familiar with at this point. Pedestrian bike and safety enforcement in the amount of $11,020. And non-enforcement safety items, $3,320.10, which will include for this year 400 of the reflective bands that we've given out in the past. Thanks to Alessandra, who had suggested the helmets. It will include 60 helmets to give out and over 600 printed educational pamphlet material. Along with that, to give out the safety equipment will be $4,560 to engage the public in giving out that equipment and literature. So the committee asked if it would be possible for more bike patrols under the grant and for officers to use in addition to the fleet. And the committee asked us, because they're interested in the department, continuing to support, the climate goals of the city and of the committee. So the short and long answer is kind of. There are certain aspects where we can, the grant will not pay for additional bikes, although the department does actually have bikes in its inventory that we can use and deploy. And under certain circumstances, we can deploy those along with the grant. At one time, we actually had up to 2 officers per shift, usually in the 4 to midnight shift during the spring and summer, that were deployed as kind of a roving patrol. Unfortunately, there's several reasons why that is no longer around. One of which is lack of staffing, which the department is struggling to fill empty positions. And we did have a bicycle unit that was disbanded a few years ago. So how has the Somerville Police Department changed its approach to the grant based on community feedback? So I've now been doing the grant since 2022. So when I came on that particular year, the grant was not accepted by Somerville because it used quotas for the officers on the grant. So Somerville actually worked with the officer grant and research to get that language removed So now quotas are no longer a part of or a requirement of the grant. In early 2023, we performed some bicycle enforcement along the Beacon Street corridor. Although this is a very effective campaign, there was some opposition to us being out there doing that type of enforcement along that corridor, which actually triggered a resolution by the council to change that type of enforcement. So later that year, we actually changed our enforcement focus for that part of the grant to pedestrian crosswalks and bicycles. So rather than red lights, it was bicycles that are ignoring a more vulnerable road user, than them. And to my knowledge, during that latter half, we didn't get any negative feedback from the community. So we are currently working with the chief to put in place a deprioritization of Idaho stops, or stops by bicycles known as Idaho stops. At the moment in the department, we kind of have a soft policy of conducting bicycle enforcement to focus on egregious red light violations and weigh the safety of a bicyclist who stops at a red light, observes cross traffic and pedestrians, and then proceeds safely through an intersection. Where our focus would now be on, bicyclists who do not show caution, when coming to a road. Which ultimately is most danger is to themselves, but it's also to other vulnerable road users. So how else has the community feedback shaped the SPD beyond the grant? Well, it does every day. So the SPD has officers dedicated solely to traffic enforcement. 3 officers Monday through Friday during the day shift. Over the past several years, the focus has shifted from fines to education and overall safety. Our goal is to be out there, to be visible, to have the public know that they're going to be held accountable for their actions and put other people's safety at risk. Speeding, red lights, J turns, parking in the bike lane, marked lanes violations, passing, you name it. We're out there trying to get people to voluntarily abide by the rules of the road. So some of the other focus of the other departments in the SPD, have been reimagined. Our vice and narcotics unit is now a community action team, and they're not focused on, drug buys and, buy busts. So, some of those members have been put into a community engagement team that engages at-risk, underprivileged youths with the sole focus of building strong, lasting bonds with those kids so that they see the police as a resource rather than an adversary. And as laws evolve and feedback is given to the police department, we try to incorporate those into our deployment mentality. One statement that I always live by, Sir Robert Peel, who is the father of modern policing, wrote the 9 pillars of policing back in 1829. And a couple of them in short say that the people are the police and the police are the people. So we're here to, the public dictates what issues are important to them to make their community feel safe. And the police have a responsibility to respond to those issues. I go by that every day, and throughout the grant writing and deploying my officers and me being out there on the street. I try to think of what do I want as a community member, and how can I better that community? What are the future goals for traffic enforcement? Admittedly, my goals are actually pretty short-sighted. Safety is obviously number one. Your road users and pedestrians should feel safe in their community. And then trying to be innovative in how we achieve that goal. For many, many years, it was just you get a fine and, the officer goes on his way and hopefully that deters you. We're trying to engage the community more and, get that compliance through just being better community members as opposed to being driven. Along with that, some of the things I'd like to see brought back is we've done a kids like bike rodeo where there's been helmets given away before. At one time, we actually had an officer teaching classes on how to ride a bike for kids. I'd also like to present to elementary age children, safety literature and safety presentation in the schools. And I'd like to see more deployments of bicycle patrols along the community path and in busy squares. Especially in the 4 to midnight and weekend times. Unfortunately, most of that requires money and manpower. Currently, the department is short on both. So the committee did ask, is there a potential for the SPD to run an automated enforcement program, for example, automated stop sign cameras? Quick answer is not currently. I know that the committee are advocates for the implementation of those. Massachusetts does not currently allow, and I know there are bills before the House to get that pushed through, but currently automated traffic enforcement is not allowed. If and when the law does pass, the department will revisit it and request input from stakeholders, to see if the implementation of it is a good resource. Any questions on that part? Kind of the initial questions of what the grant is.
You did mention that the earlier group that was doing bicycle patrol, I guess, was disbanded.
Yes.
Can you talk more about that? Like, why was it disbanded?
I'll touch on it very briefly. There was an incident that they were involved in with mutual aid in Boston. And through an investigation, the city felt that it was best to not continue to have the biking.
Was a decision taken by SPD or by somebody else?
I believe it was a joint decision between councilors, the city administrators and the SPD. I was not specifically involved in the particulars of that, so I would like to see that come back. So,
One of the questions I have for you, this is Ginny, is what can you do to make bicycles audible? For those of us who are blind, bicycles are a tremendous hazard to us because they're silent.
I could definitely work into next year's grant, some type of, we remember all putting the bicycle cards in our spokes when we were kids. Something of that, that's a very valid and interesting point that I would never thought.
Like bells as well, I imagine could help.
You said, just briefly that the bicycle patrols were kind of, the committee had mentioned it because of the climate goals, and I think it's a little bit different. It's that, when I first moved to Somerville, I would drive everywhere, and I never noticed the issues that that bikers deal with. But now that I use a bike for most of my trips, it's a very different perspective. And I think that's more of the issue of getting more cops to realize what kind of issues affect people when they're riding on bikes, rather than like trying to reduce carbon emissions by, driving.
We definitely try to be innovative and engage the public the way the public wants to be engaged. As you said, now that you're some of the resident, you bike a lot more, and you'd like to see some of that, interaction and engagement. There are also a lot of parts of the city that are inaccessible by cruisers. The community bike path has very limited access, if any access. We do have a small four-wheel vehicle that will go on the bike path, but that's more like very specific deployment. Like if you had to extricate someone from the bike path. I will report back to my superiors that, that the committee, if the committee is in favor of, trying to put out those bike patrols again. Once again, that kind of goes back to staffing. The city really needs to be staffed minimally on the street by 7 cruisers. So the bike patrols would be in addition to that. And at present with our current roster of people, it's hard to add beyond that 7.
Are the bikes that the department currently has, are they just regular bikes, or are they e-bikes?
I think there's 1 e-bike, and then the remainder dozen or so are like Cannondale, mountain bikes.
Go ahead, Christopher.
You said that there needs to be 7 cruisers on patrol. Is that so that the bikes have to be counted as in addition? Is that due
That's
to a SPD policy? Where is that requirement that the patrols have to be in automobiles versus foot patrols or bicycles? Where's that coming from?
I would have to get back to you on exactly where that is. I know that we're slated for seven, our minimum staffing is 7 patrol vehicles. Bicycles aren't able to carry the same amount of equipment, and their response times isn't the same as a motorized vehicle.
I understand some of the equipment, but especially, with an e-bike, it might be surprising. And the response time, I think I said this previously, I disconcur for some places. I understand police can get in a lot of places, but I also understand that bicycles in a busy urban environment can respond faster than full-size, especially SUV cruisers. And I believe there have been studies on that.
And that's something that we could, bring up to the chief and work on. Like I said, one of my goals here, coming here tonight, is to gather ideas, to go back with and to be innovative. Thank you, Chris.
This is Ted. Just a question. Well, actually, first of all, I just wanted to say thank you for the speed notification sign, especially the one on Beacon Street. That's in my neighborhood, and I think it helps. So I'd like to see more of those. And then the question I had is just sort of how you think about measuring success of the grant. Like how do you know if what you're doing is working, and whether you need a different approach. And I'm just partly asking that in the context of the move from fines to kind of warnings. So I think I would personally be inclined to think that fines are more effective, and we'd like to see that come back.
An officer out there with the blue lights on, with the car pulled over, usually affects more people around them than just, just that one. We have been asked before, and it has been contemplated through the grant to kind of do like more covert, operations with like the pedestrian crosswalks. Whenever you pull somebody over and that cruiser is out there with the lights on, like I said, you're not just affecting that person, everyone who passes by them, especially the people that were in the immediate vicinity of them when they got pulled over that saw the violation happen, it definitely affects them as well. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, I mean, I think maybe a little broader, just on the question of
how-
sort of measuring success.
how do we
if you
measure
ever, go back.
Every year that we put in for the grant, we have to put a tally of a bunch of statistics down. Crashes, which is broken down into, a multitude of categories, cars, pedestrians, bicycles. And what the state does is year over year, they look at those numbers statewide and look for trends based on, where the grant was deployed. It does take 2 to 3 years to kind of see the effects. I know from doing the grant that if we do like a June and July speed, one of the places we focus on is College Ave, because it happens to be a place where many violations happen. As it gets toward the end of those campaigns, it's harder to find people. Now that might be short-lived, but we can only do what we can do. We try to deploy, as I said, the traffic unit has 3 officers dedicated, and they're out there on College Ave all the time. The grant is more focused in certain areas. Is that a little anecdotal? Yes. We have seen in the past years that we have not had the grant. Certain statistical numbers have risen, pedestrian accidents, bicycle accidents, like.
I have few questions, I think just 3. One, so I think one of my, this is really helpful, by the way, thank you so much. I think one of my questions, I suppose, whenever I look at the municipal road safety grant, is that there seems to be ambiguity in the way that the grant itself is written in terms of what pedestrian and bicycle enforcement means or could mean. And, in the past, we've seen the bicycle enforcement mean literally we are enforcing against the bicycles, right, for dangerous behavior. But in your grant applications, I've also seen pedestrian and bicycle enforcement being used as enforcing against dangerous driving behavior that tends to affect pedestrians and cyclists the most. So I'm just curious, if you could clarify what your approach is in the grant, and what you tend to mean by pedestrian and bicycle enforcement.
So the pedestrian and bicycle enforcement is kind of lumped into the same category because they're both vulnerable road users. Although the enforcement necessary for both groups is very different. To simplify it, it's really in 3 categories. So it would be vehicles against pedestrians, which primarily is crosswalks. I mean, there's some red lights and stop signs in there, but that's primarily crosswalks. It's vehicles against bicycles, which is J-turns, bike lanes, any of those vehicle oriented violations that would be against bicycles. The 3rd section is bicycles, bicycle compliance with current laws. And, that's where we touched upon the deprioritization of the safe Idaho stops. And the shift to bicycle versus pedestrians, that we have done in the past. So given those 3 sections, normally what I would do deploying this, the more well-rounded you are in your grant for this year, gives you a leg up towards your application for next year. So if you, if you ask for that bicycle enforcement and you do only pedestrians, they're gonna look at that going, well, we said to do bicycle and pedestrians, and your score is gonna be lower in that category. And because it's a competitive grant, there's a chance that we may not get, the entire amount, for the grant. So it's really trying to balance what the community wants with what the state wants and trying to find that, that middle ground where, we're enforcing, the rules and regulations that are important to the city, but are also, can make that biggest impact on safety. What I try to do is with those three elements, the cars versus bicycles, all of my grant deployments, and specifically the bike and pedestrian deployments, if they see a violation of a car versus bicycle, like I said, the J turning, the passing, the honking, anything of the above, they're instructed to pull that vehicle over and have an interaction with that vehicle. It's very hard to find those. Usually those are the result of an accident, especially with the J turns. And we try to, in the traffic unit, if we can assign blame to the vehicle that did a J turn in front of the bike, we issue a citation to hold them accountable. Like I said, it's hard to find them, but through any of the deployments, the full $60,000 grant, if they come across it at any time, that's one of my my line items when I deploy people. So the last two categories, which are pedestrian safety and bicycle enforcement, I usually try to split the grant funding for that between those two. And I reserve the pedestrian portion for, like I said, late August, early September, when the college kids are going back in and school age kids are going back in, because that's when it really makes the most impact to have people go, oh, I need to stop at crosswalks. So that other half would be divided among several different deployments throughout the year, hopefully.
Okay, gotcha. Super helpful. Really quick point of clarification, but I thought the city council had already approved the FY25 grant. Am I?
FY24.
They approved that one?
Yeah. So the FY24 just ended September 15th.
Okay.
They approved it, I believe it was the last week in June.
Okay, yes, that's what I'm thinking of.
So that, I'll actually touch on that. If you want me to do that now, I can touch on the FY24 and what we were able to accomplish during that grant.
Let's make sure that nobody else has questions before we move on.
I've got one.
Yeah, go ahead, Kristen.
Has there ever been, one of the grant activities, has there ever been like a bus lane enforcement on like Broadway or anything?
Not yet, not specifically focused towards bus lanes. And my guess is because this is a statewide grant, that a lot of communities don't have the bus lanes to enforce. And if they do, there are other problems that are more pressing to the greater
Immediate safety.
Yeah. We do, in the department, specifically the traffic unit, that's one of the things that they look out for is bus lane violations. Once again, it's a large city, you have many miles of bus lane, and to have have those officers deployed around the bus lanes. If anybody does have any specific times of date where you know that a bus lane is being routinely violated, the city's 311 system actually now has the ability to send updates directly to the traffic unit, so that we can monitor citizen complaints and react to those appropriately.
Just follow up on that last 311 side, out of curiosity for bike lane violations, if somebody's driving a bike lane or parked in the bike lane, does that fall to just SPD, or is that also parking enforcement?
I believe if they're parked there for an extended period of time, traffic and parking enforcement can issue them a citation. I believe they have that ability. Once again, one of the things that it's hard to do with the police department is usually that is either a delivery driver or someone picking up. It's not someone parking for an hour or two. And, all of the officers, on their regular patrols, if they come across those, they're instructed to, take appropriate action with those. But once again, you have to be at the right place, the right time, and the volume of those violations that are happening in the city. Although they do happen, I'm not saying that they don't. It has to be right place, right time, and they have to be there long enough for us to, to respond and either see it or speak to it.
I have a question. I'm a pedestrian, and it's not intuitively, believable to me that, in fining people who violate crosswalks is less effective than not. I can't, my head doesn't get that.
So nationally, the police have been turning from straight monetary citations to more education. And the numbers of accidents and deaths hasn't really risen. They've stayed kind of moderate. One of the things that we're trying to do is we're trying to do more enforcement. So we're interacting with more of the public. Rather than catching just those few and being very hard on them. Like I said, more visibility, the blue lights, you affect more people as you're out there. And the people who get violations, they really fall into two categories: people who just don't get it, and they've got 50 items on their driver's history, and then the people who just happen to forget that there is a crosswalk there, and by you pulling them over, it's it's going to remind them for quite some time in the future.
So a few months ago, we were talking about the double parking situation on Elm Street, Davis Square. I wonder if we can use that as an opportunity for an educational encounter where an officer could explain the rules of the game in that specific setting, just because there's so much.
And the department has deployed officers on overtime. Usually that's like Friday, Saturday nights. I mean, it's every night, but it's worse on Friday, Saturday nights. And we have deployed officers out there. And it's a continuing problem. That's not something that we could do under the grant, but it's definitely something that, and as I said, the more feedback we have, whether it be through city councilors or through that 311 system, as I said before, the people are the police and the police are the people. If we don't have that feedback as to where the city wants our officers deployed, we make our best guess as to where they're needed. I don't get down Davis Square much on a Friday, Saturday night. So to have the community say, whether it be through constituent services or through a counselor or through that 301 system, say, hey, I've noticed, that between 7 and 8 on Friday night, you can't drive down Elm Street. Could you please dedicate some resources to that? And that's good justification to the department for being able to dedicate additional resources to that specific problem. But to circle back to the grant, that's not something that could be covered.
Meredith, you have the last question until, so we can let Sergeant McCary get to his second presentation, but please go ahead.
Perfect. So you mentioned, you're making your best guesses about where to deploy enforcement resources, and sort of thinking about the back to school kinds of campaigns, and also thinking about, maybe people in the community that may not be as aware of 311 as a resource, or city councilors. Are there any other sources of information that you use, like, for example, the crossing guards that are staffed around schools, or the school administrations, or how are you sort of getting the message out to members of different language communities and things like that?
So guess may have been a slightly watered down term. We do use
Yeah, I mean, educated, certainly educated and informed guess, but yeah.
we do use, statistical analysis, usually, citations by, all officers, which are kind of more random, because they're patrolling the streets, whereas the traffic unit is really more focused. Where there are violations, where there are complaints, and where there are accidents. So we have two people that, kind of provide us with statistical analysis, and where those items, kind of meet, that's where we, try to deploy.
Okay, thank you.
Right, tell us about FY24.
So the FY24 grant that, Municipal Road Safety Grant that ran from, November of 23 until September 15th of 24, was approved, in late June, 2024. So the grant was, almost over at that point. So out of the, $60,000 grant, we were able to use, approximately 58, I'm sorry, just over $50,000 of that grant. There's some items on it, specifically the hard goods, the speed feedback sign, the LiDARs, that we were not able to purchase only because they have to be, in our inventory before July 1st. It's actually April 1st, but we got an extension until July 1st, but they would have had to have been in our inventory prior to that for the grantor to accept them. Unfortunately, with the timing of that, those items, were not able to be utilized. We were able to, in the speed safety campaign, do 1,092 motor vehicle stops. And the pedestrian safety campaign, we did 448 motor vehicle stops. Along with that, there were 68 hours of non-enforcement community engagement, which included National Night Out. That was very successful this year, thanks to our Officer Priscilla. She kind of spearheaded that for the department. And we were able to give out 500 lighted safety bracelets during roving, community officers roving the community, and just engaging with people. Along with that, between all those campaigns, we gave out over 1,000 educational pamphlets. Any questions on that? So if anybody had a question, these were the bracelets that we gave out last year. They're rechargeable, they're lighted, they have 3 modes. They're for vulnerable road users, bicyclists, pedestrians, runners, walkers, children. These went over big the last 2 years. At National Night Out, we had a table, and the amount that we had allotted went in a flash. I think it was within half an hour that they were on. Along with that, there's several different, like I said, pamphlets that we give out. Look is one of the big ones. This was designed by EOPS. There's also hands-free, distracted driving, how to stay safe on 2 wheels. And the how to stay safe on 2 wheels is actually was a joint venture between Somerville and Cambridge bicycle coalitions. So we were able to borrow that from them, and give those out, mostly to drivers, to watch out for bicyclists. I think that's really all I have. As I said, for the 2025 grant, let me touch on that. The numbers have changed slightly in the different categories. The traffic enforcement which is, typical classical, enforcement. We hope to deploy 400 hours. And we're asking, the grant for, just over $30,000 for that. The traffic safety equipment, we're asking for 2 handheld, and I think may have touched on this before, 2 handheld LiDAR units, 4 portable breathalyzers, and 1 pole-mounted speed feedback sign. The pedestrian bicycle safety enforcement, we're asking for $11,000 and hope to deploy about 140 hours among those sections. We're asking for 60 hours or $4,500 to attend up to 5 events, such as the Summer Street events, National Night Out, or those roving officer deployments to engage the public. And we hope to purchase 60 bicycle helmets to be given out during those same engagements, over 600 pamphlets, and another 400 of the respective advertisements. If anybody has any questions on anything I've touched on, if you do notice that there are, or if you speak with anybody in the community that knows of any traffic or vehicle, traffic related issues, violation issues, they can report that, through the 311 systems, constituent services, or their counselor, to get back to us to better focus our deployment of our officers, to take care of those issues.
Just out of curiosity, what happens to the unused funds? Do you have to return that to the state?
Correct. We only get reimbursed for the funds that we use. So for this past campaign, where we just used over 50,000 of our allotted 60,000, that would go back in the pool. So it's ultimately federal money, and it would go back in for future grants of the same type.
Can I ask a clarifying question about 311? What is the appropriate category for a 311 request if somebody, if we notice sort of like recurring, issues with vehicle traffic? Like violations at a crosswalk, for example?
So for violations, you would call 311 and you would say that I have a motor vehicle violation, a complaint of violations.
On the online system, would it just be under like miscellaneous or unknown?
We're working with them to the online portion to grow it. But I definitely know the system is set up to have the complaints come right to the traffic unit, which is a new within the last couple of weeks.
Okay, thank you.
On the automated enforcement side of things, I know that obviously we've had the bills at the State House for a long time now. I had been talking with a city councilor who, and it was just mentioned at a presentation last night with an employee of the state, the possibility for pilots of automated enforcement without necessarily the bills going through, and like some internal discussion has been had around like the legality of like testing programs, basically. I'm curious. I mean, obviously, like I understand that like you're not able to like, launch a full program, but I'm curious about the feasibility of just a pilot.
That would probably be a discussion for another day. I mean, I'm not opposed to, like I said, engaging stakeholders, such as, this committee or other committees, the counselors, city residents in that discussion. Definitely would have to, have the city solicitors and probably well above my pay grade involved in those discussions. Yeah, I don't think at the moment the department has an opinion either way. Definitely not closed to ideas.
Any other questions for Sergeant McCary?
This is Ted. Another, sort of big picture question. I guess if you could, and this may be beyond the scope of what you're talking about today, but if there was something that you could change about, sort of city policy or laws or something that would kind of make it easier for you to do your job better, what would stand out to you?
So ultimately, the police department wants the citizens to trust the department, and to be supported by the citizens and in the city government. The more support that the department gets from the city and from the city government, the better we can police the people. The more programs that we can unroll, the more people we can engage with. Usually when people meet a police officer, it's not a happy situation in general. And, police officers do a lot of good work that goes unnoticed. Like I said, we do have a pilot program with underprivileged youth. But that's only 2 officers. It's a drop in the bucket. There's, hundreds of youth in the city. Some that could definitely use some interaction with, stable individuals. I personally would like to expand upon that. And I would like to see, once again, it goes back to the people of the police, the police of the people, that community engagement and that trust that goes both ways, and that support of the community, with the department, goes a long way towards, if the officer feels fulfilled that he's doing his job well, it's being received well, and the community, has his back, he's more apt to, take those extra steps, that build more community, that will, and it's a landslide in the right direction.
You mentioned before that you had some staffing issues, placement issues. Can you talk more about it? Like, is it an issue that people are not applying, they don't want to be cops, or that, there's no funding, or maybe
That's the biggest issue at this point.
Okay.
When I got on, in the early mid 2000s, if you didn't get a 99 or 100 on the test, you were never getting on a department. Now, the lists are being exhausted long before departments have filled their rosters. If we're sending out 40 cards to fill 10 spots, we might get 10 applicants, and out of that, 3 might go to the academy, and maybe 2, will go through to become officers, at the end of the year. It's the last several years have been rocky at best for officers. And, people can, work from home, make the same as a police officer, and not go through what a police officer goes through. So I'd like, a return of, people wanting to be police, to wanting to engage the community. Ultimately, that's why I got into policing. I wanted to, make a difference. I wanted to, be the person who, was there, when someone needed help. And it's, being a police officer, it's a tough life. And it takes a certain individual to be a police officer. I would like to send out 40 cards and have 40 applicants fighting, for 10 positions. That it was like, when I got on. But the day will come when, when that changes, hopefully.
Oh, because it comes to mind that, communities like us, we can try to help you on both from a funding perspective and from a visibility perspective on getting new applicants. Especially if there is a way to hire for a specific type of project, like, the bike patrol unit, for instance, might just entice more people to, think about the opportunities.
The more diverse a police department, and the more departments, the more internal departments that police department has, the more enticing it is for new applicants, because they will have a place to go within the department.
Yeah.
Right now in Massachusetts, to become a police officer, you're basically dedicating your entire career to one department for the remainder of your career. You can jump departments, but it's very difficult. And usually you start at the ground floor when you change departments. So applicants want to go into a department that is diverse, that is community engaged, that has the backing of the community, and they want a diverse work environment where, for 3 or 4 years, I can be working with, underprivileged children, and then I can be working with domestic violence victims, and then for a couple of years, I can be working with community policing or traffic or, a motorcycle unit, which I am a supporter of. Cambridge has one, and I would like to have, motorcycle officers out there every day. Those are the ways that you entice. Salary is nice. But, those other components really do go into, attracting the public to become officers.
How many officers are there currently, and what is the amount that's supposed to?
Don't quote my numbers, because I haven't checked it lately. I believe after, the 3 that are in the academy graduate, we'll be up to, I want to say 93. And we're funded for 98. And that's down from 120 in the late 90s. So a lot of departments, within the police department, and a lot of programs have been cut. We no longer have community policing. We used to have 7 community police officers. Their job every day was to just go out to each of the wards, engage the members of that ward, and elicit reconnaissance from that ward. What was the problem? How can we help? We just don't have the staff to do that, at this point.
I mean, we could. I really want to try to collaborate somehow and try to get some of that message out to our counselors and see if we can get more officers on the road doing that type of work. Because otherwise, I mean, we're not gonna solve the problem here.
Unfortunately, police need to be out there and need to be seen to be effective. Running from call to call, playing cleanup, isn't really an effective way to engage the community.
And I don't know how other people are seeing the police out there, but I can tell you from what you're saying here is that I was not expecting to see these types of problems. Because I think in the minds of the regular population that might apply to be a police officer, they would be thinking about, working through the crime issues and the more hardcore stuff.
That is still there in police work.
Yeah.
But there's a lot more involved, than just what everybody sees on TV.
Right.
Ultimately is, and I really wish that the police shows that were on TV really did a better job of, painting the picture of what officers really do in a day.
One of the problems that I see with the lack of community policing is that you folks don't really understand the disabled community. And there are many of us with a variety of different disabilities. And, you really don't understand us.
I agree. The police department is open to having, a dialogue with any group, whether it be PTAC or mobility or, people with, disability difficulties. Last year we had a presentation on sign language, which, historically, we got a card with, 8 or 9 very, very specific, ways to interact with someone with sign language, who's an ASL user. There are programs that have been in development for a while. I forget what the name of it is, Patty's group. Where officers have been learning how to engage communities. People with different abilities. Whether it be autistic or dementia. The more funding that we could get for training, officers are more than willing to learn.
Ginny, do you think that, meeting with the Commission for Persons with Disabilities would be helpful at all?
Oh, I think so. I think so. Because one of the problems, and I'll just give you an example. One of the problems that I encounter when someone gives me directions, they'll point and say over there. Well, excuse me, but where is over there? What are you pointing at? Nothing frustrates me more.
So are you familiar with the commission?
I'm not.
It's similar to our group. It's the Commission for Persons with Disabilities, but it's a group of community members in Somerville who I think all have disabilities themselves. They're not just allies. Is that correct, Jenny?
Yes, many.
Yes.
Yeah. There are people with intellectual disabilities on that group, and there are people who are blind. I'm not sure about other disabilities.
So Jenny, if you want to get my contact information through Alessandra, that's not really my specialty, but I can definitely put you in touch with, like I said, we do have a core group of 3 officers right now that is that kind of does that specific community engagement. It's kind of like a mini community policing.
Okay.
Group.
The chairman of that committee is Holly Simeone.
Okay.
And Pauline and I can work with you folks on getting in touch with her.
Okay. Yeah.
And see what can be set up.
Yeah. The more information we have, like I said, whether it be, complaint information about, specific times and violations that are happening, or, community action groups or committees, that have information that they wish the police department knew about. We have annual trainings at the department that every officer goes through. They're basically standardized trainings. And there are, half an hour, modules that are open, where either a presentation or slides or something to that effect, from a group could be incorporated into that training.
Pauline did that with the Somerville Fire Department, and they were very responsive and receptive.
Mm-hmm.
So
it's more of the if someone were to come to us and ask us, we would graciously accept some engagement. Very rarely do people reach out to the police department.
And that's sad. That's really sad. And I appreciate all your efforts. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim.
I wanted to raise a question that came up in our last meeting, and I didn't get a chance to include it on the list of questions. But if you have any insight, we were wondering about crossing guards, just because there are so many gaps and inconsistencies in crossing guard coverage.
Yep.
And curious if you can provide insight on like the status of the crossing guard program and if there are any plans to improve it.
So they are very, very understaffed. So one of the officers in my group is in charge of that. And once again, don't quote me on the numbers. I believe they're like 25. Their roster has the ability to hire 25 more individuals. The city HR has tried to put out like targeted ads. The department, I believe on their website has, an ad up for, people to, to come in and become a crossing guard. It's really light work. The training and the skill set necessary is, is very low. But it is in the middle of the day, where, your bulk of citizens, don't have that time available to, dedicate. The pay is reasonable. So touching on that, I know that there has been some discussion, there are certain areas of the city that, that we don't control the crossing guards, McGrath Highway being one of them. I know that they had asked for one at, Broadway. Right now, once we fill all of our schools and all of the access ways to the schools, we could probably, look at taking on other responsibilities like McGrath Highway, or the high school. I know that's been tossed around a little bit. The program is designed for unaccompanied school-age children. High schoolers don't really fall into that category, and accompanied children, that are accompanied by either a responsible older sibling or an adult, don't really fall into that category. And like I said, being so understaffed, they're trying to hit the big intersections that are closest to the schools to make the most impact to the most amount of students. I would love to have another 10 or 15 of them. They could be hired, quite quickly, and deployed, quite quickly. If you're on any, if anybody listening at home is on any Facebook groups or message boards, if you want to put out the word that, somebody is looking for crossing guards, you could help.
All right, we have 5 minutes. Any other pressing questions? Okay, awesome. Well, thank you again for being here with us tonight, Sergeant McCary, really helpful. And I think we all look forward to engaging with you on future iterations of the road safety grant.
Well, thank you for having me, Chair. Thank you, members and citizens.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody. We'll say goodbye to you online. See you next month.
Sorry.
Yes.
So, and the, actually, Kate would probably have a bit more information on this, but the Elm Beacon connector, I know that there's a survey for that, right?
Sorry, do you want me to end the meeting or is it still the meeting?
Yes, we can end the meeting. Yes. Sorry. No.